we scared of the silence?
Hey guys, welcome to what we're calling a conversational video. Our hope for this video is to give you a little bit of insight into a conversation that Key and I would typically have. If you don't know, we're brothers, and over the last sort of like 5 years or so, as Tempest Calm has become a thing and we've sort of stumbled across creating this album, we chat all the time, and we thought it'd be an interesting idea, if it works, to try and sort of invite you to the table and invite you into our heads, so to speak, as we sort of chat things through and have a conversation. So today we're going to be talking about Shadowlands, and specifically track 1 being Shadowlands. Before we get started though, I wanted to sort of set the conversation with what I'd call pillars, and it's probably 2 that are worth mentioning. With everything that we do, Tempest Calm, these 2 things are in mind. The first one is that whenever you and I or anyone goes through a dark time, a Shadowlands experience, I think there's a tendency to be tempted to believe the lie that you're alone in walking through that thing. And the thing on my mind and heart is really, from this project, is just to remind you that no matter what you were going through, you were never alone in that. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that everything that we have created for this project comes from the perspective of looking inward and assessing heart, soul and mind, and sort of trying to wrestle with things and find our place in them. So none of it is from a perspective of pointing fingers and laying blame. None of it is about accusation. It's purely from the perspective of looking at how we have really wrestled with things. Is that fair to say, Kay?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think, we just want to invite you. We can figure this out together, but you got a seat at the table. And today we're gonna chat about Shadowlands.
So track 1 is Shadowlands. Maybe we should start with just what the context is. Like, why did we actually write Shadowlands? And also, at what point did we realise that Shadowlands was going to be something rather than an isolated track?
Yeah.
So why did we write Shadowlands? Let's start there.
That's a huge question.
It's a big question.
Shadowlands. I think it all stemmed from us going through probably what we've come to define as a loss in spiritual community.
Yeah.
So we grew up in a beautiful community, spent our whole lives there. It was our home, and so many amazing memories, so many good times. And towards the end, I think, it became a bit messy, really. I've been thinking about how to articulate it, and I think the best definition that I've come up with is really like a failure at kingdom living. And where we play a part in that, don't we? I mean, that's we all had a role in that to some capacity. Obviously when you lose something that you're so deeply a part of, you sort of got to try and find your identity in it, and suddenly that's gone.
I think as well as we got to the point where we were kind of trying to like articulate how we felt through that experience, it coincided with us writing music. But I know for myself personally, like, I never went to write music as a product of what we went through. It became more of an expression of how I felt. Like, for me, I would say that whole loss of a spiritual community was the catalyst to get us back in the room to write how we were feeling. But as we started to write and experience over a 2 to 3 year period, you realise it was just the catalyst, wasn't it? It was much deeper. Like, for me, it was probably touching on issues of identity, thinking I was someone that maybe I wasn't, or that my security was found in this community or in other things in life. It's probably worth mentioning that Shadowlands as a track, remembering we're talking about track 1 Shadowlands here.
Yeah.
I know when we first started jamming it, we never sat down to think, let's write a record about our experiences and what we've just gone
totally.
through.
Yeah. And there was very much that period where, like, even though we talk often, I remember that first year or two, we were going through a very similar thing, but I felt really alone. Like,
isn't it crazy to think that even as brothers,
yeah,
we dealt with it in a way where we isolated ourselves? It's quite sad. It's actually quite sad.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the point of this. Like, it's a weird thing to like get together in front of a camera and talk, but the reality is, like, even brothers who talk every day can somehow separate themselves and try to go through a similar thing alone. So yeah, it's worth. Well, hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully this is worth doing.
Yeah, no, I think it is definitely worth, like, even just to talk about openly and transparently, but for the listener as well, just to say, like, you mentioned at the start, but you're not alone. And that's the lie, isn't it? Like, it just gets you, separated from everything you believe in and challenges you at the core. And it's not always it's the deeper things that are going on in your own individual heart, your own individual life, your soul, or whatever you want to call the word. It's the deeper things that are being played with. And sometimes, I just can't get past the word catalyst. I think for me, it's really important for me to state that, it got us in the room. And I love that being artists in whatever form, for us it's music, but it's just our chance of expressing ourselves. So even maybe fleshing on that conversation, riffing off that, let's talk about how we wrote the track. So remembering that it's about Shadowlands, like, how did that track start? Because I know we definitely didn't think this is track one of a record.
100%.
No.
I don't even think it was the first song that we wrote.
Probably not.
I mean, we went back through the voice memos, which you should share one day. But,
so actually, for our listener as well, because this is kind of insightful, but probably a lot of bands do this. But what we used to do and what we still do is, if we ever have an idea, it's such a good thing about the iPhone, we will always grab out the voice memo and record the idea whilst we're jamming. So what we found with that is we've been able to look back from 2016 all the way through to now and capture the moments that we've had.
Well, I made like just a note here. So the first voice memo captured of an idea of Shadowlands was in 2017, and that would have been minimal. Like, we talked, I think I was riffing on that idea of silence, but like that, like, are we scared of the silence, scared to hear God speak? That phrase was pretty much it.
But that phrase was enough to write a song around. For us, it just took us 2 years.
A long time. The next recording of something like Half Solid was July 2018.
So a year later.
Much, but the drums, like, Maddie was like doing some like real quick 16th sort of thing. It's completely different to the groove that it is now. And then the next recording that we have of Matt actually drumming the beat is October 2018. And then it wasn't until Feb 2019 that you wrote the main hook.
Yeah, I'll talk about that actually. I feel with Shadowlands by, what did you say, October 2018. October 2018 we had our lyrics and we had our structure. Yeah, and I had the melody at that. And the melodies were in, and I think we were landing on where the drums would sit, but the drums didn't actually come in until like verse 2 at that point. So this is kind of cool for the listener as well, but interestingly enough, when we wrote that track, and we'll have to do videos later where we show some of his voice memos because it'll make a bit more sense as we talk through it, but the track was written to be reflective of, are we scared of the silence? But we went into a space that was only reflective, and we sat in that space. So I remember from a production point of view, we didn't have any percussion, it was very limited. It was like pretty haunting, ghostly tones. The interesting thing was, it wasn't until, what, did you say 2019? February? Yeah, February we landed on that synth line. I remember playing that in rehearsal and capturing the tension of that synth sound, for me, meant we could write the rest of the track. Like, for some reason the track fell into place. And from that point we crashed in after the intro. So it went, are you scared of the silence, scared to hear God speak? And it's this production that's kind of like, you know, reflective. But we don't go into a place of silence. We go into a place of chaos and tension. Because I think the true narrative of the story was it took us 2 years to work this out.
Oh yeah, at that point we were scared of the
We
silence.
didn't sit.
I wasn't ready to sit.
We never sat and
At all.
reflected on this in a beautiful way. We
Yeah.
went, tension, here it comes. Da-na-na-na-na-na. So for me,
Yeah.
that, from a production point of view, that kind of set up. And from that point as well, Maddie is instrumental in our production, but what he did on the drums and the drum sound, really channeling that mute math kind of vibe as well, but basically dirty drums. I just remember putting so much gaffer tape on his drum kit in the studio, right? So you have an amazing drum kit that you just kill with gaffer, but we were trying to capture that tension in the percussion. And from that point on, the whole production kind of flowed to create that. And it was probably at that point that we realised this is track one of whatever we're going to create.
Yeah, and I don't, as you say, like I don't think that was going to be an album.
No, not at that stage, no way.
I think it's worth mentioning as well, like with Matt, like a credit to him, because while like we weren't necessarily channeling his story in this, like you look there from 2017 through to 2019, the patience of that guy just to like let us sort of like figure out what we were trying to do, and him just like creatively
Creatively,
coming up with like so many different options.
yeah.
He's a good dude.
Patient Matty.
Patient Matt.
We love him for that.
Yeah, so November 2019, that's when we recorded the structure of Shadowlands on the memo, and then hit the studio with Chad at Foxhole Studios and laid it down.
Yeah, and I think we'll find in this conversation, the conversations to follow, there's a lot of pre-production that's done in-house, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think we'll talk about a bit more about this in later videos and different content, but the idea that we really discovered ourselves creating sound in a bedroom, opposed to what we know well, which is going to a studio.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think that's where like you have like probably brought like your biggest input to a record that certainly you and I have ever worked on, but you've produced this thing and made it what it is sonically.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a good segue actually, because for me, let's talk about your lyrics in a minute. For me, my expression, like I don't go and write lyrics, right? I riff off your lyrics. The amazing thing about this story is we went through it together, so it wasn't hard for me to get into the way you felt with your lyrics. But yeah, my evolution's been from like being like a keys player where I'd play piano growing up into dabbling into this world of sound creation or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, the fascinating thing and the fun thing is sitting in a room where you know you're writing a song of tension, you're confused, you're bitter, you've lost your spiritual community, you've lost what you know, you've lost your habits, you've lost your identity, trying to capture that in tone.
Yeah.
That was fun, you know? It was chaotic, but it was fun. So yeah, that sets up Shadowlands as a record as well, moving forward. But segueing into your lyrics then, because your lyrics, I mean, you've been writing lyrics with me with me in a band for like 10 plus years now. Like, that's one thing that you're so good at. Your lyrics to me are like refreshing and healing, and I sit and reflect in that space all the time. So like for me, there was a couple I just wanted to like call out personally. That first one, Are We Scared of the Silence? So that sets up everything about the Shadowlands story. Where were you at when you wrote that? Or can you even explain what that means to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we touched on it in the sense of like when we were talking about the production side of things, how we just crashed into the song. But to me, like silence is this really like scary thing in a way, because you're forced to like stop and address whatever it is that you're facing. At least that's how I feel. So when we talk about like the story behind Shadowlands, I remember being just like really lost, really confused, very bitter, just sad, and I didn't want to face the whys. Like I didn't want to face, and as well, like coming from like the spiritual side of it, you're coming from this community where like your whole life is invested in a community and in a spirit and in a belief, and when that all separates and dissipates, you're going like, what what is this? Like, what do I believe? Like, where is God in this? And, you know, obviously, like, for me, like, I've always, well, from a young age, I've believed in God, and I believe that He's got divine purpose and intention on all our lives. But when things don't go to plan, particularly in a space where God's meant to be active and and like, and for lack of a better word, like glorified, and instead there's just mess. You sit back and you go like, oh, where's God in that? Like, where's God in the shadows? That's a hard question to ask, and I found that, like, it's easier to distract yourself with noise, because noise is everywhere, right? Like social media, wars, COVID, whatever you want to call it. Like, there's just so much noise. When you get silent, you got to start. You got to think, man. You got to start addressing what's going on in here and here. And here was bad for me, like mentally. I was losing the plot. So, yeah, I was scared of the silence because I knew God would speak to me.
Yeah, I think that's a big point as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the habits we have in life now is we actually just can't slow down. We don't know how to stand in the queue waiting for a coffee without pulling out our phone. We don't know how to sit in our society anymore. We really struggle. And I mean, I know I'm the same. Like, if I can keep, the classic term is, how you going? Yeah, I'm busy. I'm good, but I'm busy. Because we can just keep one thing in front of the next, and we don't have to think. We don't have to, like, process what's actually going on deep. That's probably our story for the first few years, as you threw yourself into everything. And that's why I think it's important to note with Shadowlands as a song, the narrative is reflective of that. The song structure is reflective of the narrative, and that's why we could never have started verse 1 as a quiet, like, you know, you know, it had to crash into the way we crashed into it, which was to throw things in front of ourselves. We didn't have to, you know, self-medicate on whatever you're doing.
Totally.
You know, have to reflect on what actually happened.
Yeah. And I think even in the first line, like, these are the Shadowlands we are passing through. Is there another way to get to you? For me, like, well, I don't want to get silent. I don't want to deal with this. I'd rather go a different way. But, you know, like, that's part of the journey is surrendering to silence, and that's damn hard to do. I still struggle with it, to be honest.
Let's go for two more. One more that really sticks out to me is, don't let my soul find rest in the shade of my regret.
I remember writing that. I was standing in the shower of my rental property, which tells you how long ago that was. And I don't know if that was like a single line that I wrote down and then came back to it. I can't even remember, to be honest. But the whole idea around it was like though I walk through the valley of the shadow, that key word walk, like, I was not walking, I was standing still and stuck, and like stuck resting in the shadow. And the problem was that where I was in the regret of it all, because I wasn't trying to move out of it. I was just wallowing in it, and I couldn't get past it. So I think that was just more just a cry internally of like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I think it's touching on something like deeper again, where you talk about rest and then counterfeit rest, where you think you're stopping and recovering, but you're actually not. And that to me was such a big line. I think it took me a long time to actually process how I felt about it. I just knew when you first sung that to me, I thought, dang, that's a big line. That's a pivotal line in our story, because none of us wanted to stop in that place. Deep down, I didn't want to stop there and stay in my, like, bitterness and anger, but at the same time I did, because I didn't want to face it. You know, so totally. I would read that line as, like, just was a reminder to me constantly. I mean, especially with pre-production, I'm listening to you sing it all the time as I'm writing around it. It's like, don't let my soul find rest here in the shade of my regret. And again, it's much deeper than our story with the spiritual community. I was thinking about my past and my failures, and you know, where I wake up every morning and go like, you were that person. I'm like, no, I don't want to be that person. You know, I know I'm not that person anymore. I'm not identified by that mistake. Or whatever it was, you know. So it was much bigger than just our spiritual community, but it's a challenging line.
It's funny because, like, I wrote that in the shade of my regret, but even in hindsight, like, it can still speak. Like, it still speaks to me. Even not necessarily in that, like focusing on the circumstances of that said story, like even daily, you know, like whatever you're going through. I don't want to be here. I want to keep moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's finish with one more lyric, because I think this, when we hit the bridge of Shadowlands and it gets a little bit more sonically chaotic, it's in control, but sonically it's out of control to a degree. I hadn't written that way before. I hate that I don't understand and that all I feel is rage. I remember being in the studio and you had to sing that and channel back to where you were, and we were playing around with your microphone. We were trying different things to capture that aggression. I know for me, being on the other side of the studio wall, like through the glass, watching you do that, that was another big moment. All I feel is rage, and then you'd scream out where your voice would just break, and it says, you know, be near me. Well, be near me. Like, just talk to me about that for a minute.
Yeah, that was hard to go back to that. I think like I probably have pockets of it where like sometimes I'm like, like I feel frustrated by things, but I think really like if I'm really honest, that's just what I was feeling. Like I didn't get it. I was angry. Like rage is the best way to put it. Just this turmoil in head and heart, and just to go like, I can't see a way out of this. I can't see a way out of the dark. And God, like everything else around me has crumbled that I believed in. So you better stay near me. Please stay near me. For lack of a better word. Like I just needed him because there was nothing else. And even like I could see glimpses of him. But yeah, I don't really know how to articulate other than that.
I think that's it. I think it's good to articulate that track one finishes. There's no resolution to track one. It finishes in a place which goes, I actually don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But there's the subtle hope at that part of our joint journey that says, I know you're there.
Totally.
Be near me. Production wise, we introduce a clean sound, a clean little riff at the end on the keys, and that was for me processing in my mind that even though we got tension and chaos, there's still hope. It's there. I haven't found it yet. I know it's there. So yeah, that probably pushes us into track two.
There's that like glimmer.
Yeah.
That glimmer of hope that even though it is so damn dark, he will be near. Yeah, he will meet me in the shadows.
Yeah. It's good.
Sweet. Good chat.